Hi, Read 508. This is Dr. Keisler. I wanted to give you a little bit of feedback on your Week 7 and Week 6 forum posts and some general kind of information and feedback about the course up to this point. So we just entered Week 8, which means we are officially halfway through Read 508. So congratulations, you've made it halfway through your first course in your first semester in our reading program. So I did hand back or send back to you your assignment 2A, which was the first part of your tutoring assignment, and overall the class did excellent on those. I got a lot of really interesting information about your students, and I learned quite a bit about them, and so I'm excited to see the next part of the assignment excuse me, where you describe your tutoring sessions. So I've gotten a few emails the past couple of weeks asking me about your grades on the forum post. So if you have noticed, some of you won't notice because your scores are the same, but if you've noticed, some of your grades have been going down on the forum post, and so I'm not quite sure what's going on with this particular class, but I have noticed that the quality of the posts is slipping a little bit, and so I wanted to spend a couple of minutes and remind you of what is expected in terms of forum posts. So if you remember back to the first week of class when I gave you the course orientation, forum posting is really important in the online classes. So depending on which professors you have, they may put more or less of an emphasis on it, but I can tell you that in my classes it is a significant part of your grade, 25% of your grade, and I actually do read them all, and I don't just give credit for posting. I know some other professors may just essentially give you credit for posting and not check in, but I do have our graduate assistant, Lindsay Rutherford, give them the first go. She reads through all of your forum posts, and she's helping me out because we have so many students in this class this semester. So she reads through all of them and she puts a score on them, and then I do go through and occasionally adjust the grades either up or down as I see fit. But please be advised that I am reading all of your posts. So don't feel like you're just posting and it's out there somewhere in cyberspace and it really doesn't make a difference. So it does, and it does in my class, and you will likely have me for several classes. Because this, in an online class, is really where I get to see, since I don't meet with you face to face and I don't get to have those discussions that we would have in class, this is where I really can see the evidence that you're reading and you are understanding the course material. So, sometimes in the posts I see a few things that have gone awry. It doesn't happen very often, and I'll have to jump into a conversation. And other times you're making great points, and your classmates are making great points, and so you're really not just learning from the course materials, but you're learning from one another as well. So please take these seriously, and if you've noticed that your grades are slipping, use this reminder as kind of a midpoint regrouping for yourself. So just to refresh your memory again, 25% of your grade is on the forum post for Read 508. Like I said, it's not the same in every course, so you may want to check your other syllabi. But in order to get a 5, I expect to see about 500 words. So 500 words is about a half a page single spaced to a full page if you are double spacing. So those should be of significant length, and that's what I expect to see from the original post. So you're getting your original post. When you do responses, you get 3 points for your original post, and you get 1 point for every response back. The responses back to people do not need to be 500 words. They should just be reflective that you've read their post and you're making a significant and interesting contribution to the conversation. But that first post, I would like to see about 500 words in your response. It should be backed up with evidence, examples, and references to the readings, to what you viewed. So, if I asked a question or I gave you a prompt that was related to a video that we watched, then of course I expect to see that you're referencing that video, and then you can also reference the materials that you read. But of course, on weeks where the post is primarily regarding the readings and the screencasts, I would expect to see citations of what you have read, of things you have read in other courses if it's relevant, and you can cite what you heard in the screencast from either myself or Dr. Bowers as well. So those posts should suggest and demonstrate deep thinking about the topic of the discussion, the materials, and the concepts. Remember, this is your chance to show off. This is your chance to show that you are learning in this class and that you're going to leave Read 508 with much more information than you came to us with. To get a 4, it's kind of you're showing me again that you can back up what your statements with examples and references from the readings, the videos. You are still thinking quite deeply about the topic and the materials and the concepts. You may be getting a 4 rather than a 5 because you have some grammatical mistakes, which I haven't seen too many of this semester, so you've actually done a good job of that, but in terms of spelling and grammar and mechanics. Or it could simply be that organization. So you didn't organize your post in the way that Brett best presents your point. So a 3 would mean that your overall contribution to the discussion was pretty minimal. You may have just gone bullet by bullet and given 1 or 2 sentence responses to each of the bullet points in the prompt. Narrative style is preferred in the forum posts rather than just laying out the questions and answering them in a bulleted format. But a 3 kind of suggests kind of a surface level of thinking about the topic and the discussion. And then 2 and 1, obviously, you can see those are not satisfactory responses at all to our topic. So just a reminder for yourselves of what I'm expecting to see in terms of those forum posts. So you still have quite a few weeks if you're worried about your grades to remedy that. So just to give you an idea of evidence, these are some examples that I pulled from weeks 6 and 7 of folks that did a good job of citing the material. And so you'll see in this one, I can tell that they're pulling examples from the Rowe and Smith text. I keep wanting to say Rowe, Smith, and Burns, but they got rid of Burns for this edition. So they're citing not just the text itself, but citing the page that they got it from. Here again, the Blevins text, citing Blevins again, citing Rowe, and citing another piece of literature as well. So these are all good examples. And there are other good examples, of course, so if I did not pull yours, don't be offended. Similarly, if this is your example, I am not picking on you here, but I saw several examples of this, and so where somebody would, in maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs above, have cited the Rowe and Smith text, and then later on they're just putting page 181. So that is not proper APA citation. So please check your manual. You, even if you've told me a couple of paragraphs above which book you're citing from, you cannot just stick in page 181, a few paragraphs later and mean that you're referencing what you referenced earlier. Similarly, I see some folks just putting parentheses 111, parentheses 112. That's not an appropriate citation. So please take a look at your style guide or take a look at what some other folks have posted to get ideas of how you can properly cite those. I see some folks putting the reference on the bottom, so that's excellent practice, and that's really good for you to get into the habit of citing your sources. Again, you can also cite Dr. Bowers and myself if you listen to the screencast and you heard something that you'd like to mention in there. That's appropriate as well. And for those, you can just put Keisler, screencast, week 6. That's totally fine. All right, so let's talk about the posts that we do have. So some important points that I saw from your word recognition discussions were this idea of which strategies to use for word recognition. Lots of folks had lots to say about context clues. I know that we did not have to necessarily post back to each other on these, and so you may not have read a lot of the posts, but I did go through and I took a look at them. So one of the interesting points that came up in a few posts was this idea of having second thoughts on using context clues as the first strategy you turn to or as the primary strategy that you use. And I think where this comes from is the discussion that research has demonstrated that struggling readers, they over-rely on the strategies of context clues. And so since their decoding and their fluency skills are poor, when they come to a word that they don't know, what they tend to do is they tend to look for those context clues, whether they're picture clues, whether they go back and they read a sentence or two before that word, but they try to find things in context that help them to understand what that unknown word is. So that's okay as a semantic clue. It's not very if you're trying to figure out the meaning of the unknown word, to use context clues. Using context clues as a means of decoding an unknown word is not a very effective strategy. So when you're thinking about teaching those word recognition skills in your classroom, you think about, well, what do I want them to use this for? So a strategy such as word structure is good for meaning, and it's good for helping students to decode. And I think it's one that sometimes we shy away from a little bit because it's technical and it's more involved, and so we always use context clues. But you'll also find that a lot of words can't actually be either semantically or phonetically decoded using context clues. Students do really struggle with that, and so it is kind of ironic that then struggling students over-rely on that particular strategy. But it is still, it can be an effective strategy in the right situation. And so many of you thought that the structure clues and the context clues were the most effective, and I saw that as a theme running throughout your posts. But I think one of the most important points that many of you made was that students need a variety of strategies to apply, right? So just like anything else, the more varied and the more breadth that they have in their toolkit, the better they're going to be able to achieve reading fluency and reading comprehension. And so this point came across in your posts about phonics as well. So each kid needs that kit filled with different tools that they can pull out and use to sound out, read, and decode books for understanding or to make meaning and comprehend them. And so this was a theme that was running throughout both weeks in your forum posting. So everybody, or most people seem to really like what they saw from Miss Evans. And one of the things that I really like about that video is I think sometimes the kind of contrast between explicit and implicit phonics instruction is presented as a black and a white, and sometimes people walk away from the idea that explicit systematic instruction in phonics implies somehow that we're going to kill and drill students, when in actuality I think that Ms. Evans applies it in a really meaningful and productive and effective way, where she shows that you use those explicit skills that you're teaching to students in an explicit manner, and you build them into the other lessons, and that as long as you have the connection going through, that students are going to get multiple opportunities to practice using those sounds or those groupings, those blends, whatever they may be, and that the practice is going to be both authentic, but then also explicit. So if they have both of those, you're really going to have a much more effective and well-rounded plan for instruction. Some other points that you guys made, again, so most students need a mix of explicit phonics and a less intensive approach. People liked the activities, how she, explicitly taught those skills, and then she made sure that the books that they chose and the things that they wrote used those words, and the sentences that they made, and they read the poetry, so it was all related and all connected. But I think if you assessed her program overall, it would fall into the category of systematic explicit instruction in phonics. It definitely teaches phonics explicitly, and so it's a really good model of best practice. And I thought I'd end us with this quote, which was, "Learning to read is like a puzzle where every piece is essential to creating a whole. Miss Evans' lessons demonstrate this idea. Piece by piece, her lesson was compiled to create a whole." So just a little bit of feedback on what we've been doing, and I'm going to run out of time, so I hope that you found this helpful, and I'll